All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast here on the E2KG network. This is episode 439, 439 for Sunday, June 28th. Heading into the heat of summer here. All right, well, it is just the two of us, as you can see here tonight. Myself, TPQ Hams, Tilemaster is out. But joining us, running the boards as always, is Game Logic. Game, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I quote unquote took a week off work, but basically just did a ton of house projects that I couldn't get done on the weekend. So I'm glad to be going back to work to slow down the pace a little bit, or at least change the challenges. So, but that also means that I've had some time to play some things. But not anything big. It feels like I'm in kind of a holding pattern, waiting for something, waiting for the next thing. But I went back into my backlog to see what I have been missing, and came up with a couple games, two small little games here that I'll talk about again on the Enough to Keep Going podcast. What we do every week, or at least almost every week, unless it's a big news stories week, is that we will talk about the main games that we've been playing, and then go into the news, provide some analysis and commentary, and wrap up anything else that's been in our playlist. RPG88, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I'm going to talk about two little games. One is by a solo developer, Sean Inman. This is Ratcheteer DX. So Ratcheteer, it was originally released on the Pocket, or the not the analog Pocket, but the Playdate. There we go. That's the right one, right? The yellow one with the crank. It's a graphic style, so that gives you a hint of its graphic style, right? Like that is a very lo-fi graphic style. It very much looks like a GBC game, a Game Boy Color game, and it plays very similar. It is a top-down kind of Zelda-like, that you are going through dungeons, going into towns. Instead of your sword, you have a wrench because you are a ratcheteer who fixes things. And so you are going through, you've got different dungeons that have different items. It's all in all about, it reads to be about 3 to 5 hours is what I read about it. I'm only maybe 2 hours in. It's a cute little game, works great on the Steam Deck. It is, after a week of doing projects at home, it was nice to sit on the couch and kind of go back through something that was enjoyable. But also not super, I need to be mentally invested too much. Real Nate, thanks for joining us as well. We're just getting started here, so I'm glad you made it. So yeah, Ratcheteer DX is, if you like kind of old school Zeldas, I think it was $5, maybe a little bit more. I bought it on sale. So not a huge investment, and a real easy, it's on Switch as well. So a PC and Switch. I played it on Steam Deck, and of course, with that type of resolution, it runs pretty seamless. So that was Ratcheteer. My other game is the total opposite swing of totally needed to be mentally engaged. And this is a game that came out during Summer Game Fest. It was highlighted on the Pride Parade. It is Trading Card Inspector. Trading Card Inspector is by Daydream Gallery. Daydream Gallery is a 3-person team. And so again, a relatively small, this is a black and white game. It is like, it is Papers, Please for collectible cards. How about that? That, right? If you remember Papers, Please, that idea of you have information in front of you, you have a series of other side information that you're checking that information against to see if it's valid. And so the setup here is, as a trading card inspector, you are going through a trading card game and looking to see if the cards are valid or if they're invalid cards, if they're fakes. And then if they're valid cards, you need to basically assess them, provide a market value on them. And so it definitely kind of fits in with the trading card market in terms of Magic the Gathering and Pokemon being very highly sought after, and the aftermarket cards and everything else. So, but the idea here is you get a card that randomly pops up, and the first kind of things, it's a series of logic puzzles that cards have. They can be good, evil, or neutral. They can be uh, basically another. They have two kind of what would be their kind of elemental aspects on them, right? A good, neutral, and evil, and then also a kind, spoiled, or angel, spoiled, and neutral. And so the first kind of way that you evaluate the card is that, like, a good card cannot be, or an angel card cannot be evil, and a good card cannot be spoiled, and that all your cards can't be neutral. And so then you have a series of, you have like an attack and a defense and a cool basic. You have three stats. One stat can only be a prime number, or can't be a prime number. One stat has to be between 1 and 5, and the other stat can't be bigger than the number of vowels in the card's name. And so you're going through, and kind of each card, you're kind of evaluating this, and it is, you have you have like 4 lives. And so as you go through a run, you're going from kind of node to node in the story mode, and you have to successfully evaluate X number of cards. It starts off small, starts to get bigger, and if you make 4 wrong, or if you make 3 wrong and you have 1 heart, you go on to the next round, you only have 1 heart there. And so then you have, so that tells you, okay, so this card is valid or it's invalid based on that type of logic assessment, kind of word puzzly. And then you have to, the valuation of the card is the total of the stats, and then there are some additional factors like, is it one of these cards? Is it one of these cards, like a named card? And if it is, it's +5 or +1 or -2, based on kind of the rarity, is how they kind of in-world pitch it. And then, like in a trading card game, you have banned cards as well. Soldier for Life, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. We're talking about Trading Card Inspector, a small little indie game made by 3 people that just came out last month or the beginning of June on Steam. Very much kind of a logic puzzle game. And so then you add all that up, and you submit it to say it's valid or invalid. And it's definitely a one more run type of game. Like, it is, if I had elementary school kids, I would put this in front of them for math and logic reasons. Like, if I was I could see where this goes into lots of different, I mean, there are educational things here. It's also really kind of fun because of that kind of puzzle solving aspect. It's not something that, I don't know that I played for more than a half hour at a spot. So played a couple rounds, played a couple sessions, but it's not something I'm going to sit down and kind of marathon through in an evening. But it works really well. It looks okay on the deck. It's pretty small. It was much better on PC, but again, it is really enjoyable for such a relatively straightforward and simple game. But you kind of have to like some logic puzzles to be able to enjoy it. And if you do, Trading Card Inspector for under $10 is a whole lot of fun. So nothing fancy and 2 little indie games here, Game Logic, but any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple, one of which will catch you off guard. So first question, going back to Ratcheteer.
Yeah.
You play a lot of indie games, so I'm going to put you on the spot to get a temperature on this game and ask you to score it on a scale of 1 out of 10.
Ratcheteer, I would say it's a 7-ish game, right? Like, it is not fancy. It's not doing anything super revolutionary. There are better kind of Zelda. Elementals, I thought was a really good kind of, or Yeah, I think that was what it was. That was very Zelda-like, but had like you had elemental attacks, and you would be moving those to interact with the world. It was a game I played last month or so. This is again, it was only $5 or $6, and so I'm pretty comfortable spending five. I'm pretty comfortable playing a 7 out of 10 game at $5 or $6. Um, it's not something that if you're looking for a big investment, it's not doing anything drastically new. Yeah, so it's definitely it's a perfectly fine little indie Zelda.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the price because that was another thing I was going to ask, just to again kind of get a pulse of the game. And give me one thing that either one thing that you think. Wait, yeah, either. No, oh, I must have hit something on my mic. Give me one thing that you think you'll remember, like a year from now, about this singular particular indie, or it could just be one thing that just kind of stands out to you most of all about this game that is particular or unique from the other like catalog of indie games that you play.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Ratcheteer, the thing that stands out to me is earlier this year, I was digging around on Reddit, even on the Zelda-like subreddit, trying to find other games that kind of scratch that itch of like a old school Zelda, um, and without like without a big investment, right? Like it's the price of a sandwich at lunchtime. Like this was not a big commitment. I think what I'll remember is what it does with so little, because it is originally a play date. Like it is not graphically pushing a whole lot, and anytime that the fact that it's made by one person, I think is always an interesting endeavor creatively. But if you ask me in a year from now if I remember what Ratcheteer was, I'm probably going to have to think pretty hard, because it could also very easily blend in with a lot of other Zelda likes.
Okay, and then going on to Trade Inspector, I'm not sure if you mentioned. Could you give me like, is there any other game that like Trade Inspector like reminds you of or harkens to?
Yeah, to me, trading card inspector reminds me of Papers, Please, of where you are, right? You've got documents in front of you, and these people, you have to decide if they're going to get through the border crossing or not, based on some information. And Papers, Please is a much more complex game because it's dealing with political issues, and it even builds that into its gameplay, right? Like you can know the papers are fake, but you can still let somebody through because of they align with your political cause, or the way that you're choosing to play that game. And you have to be aware of how many you're letting through, so not to raise the awareness of your supervisors. It has a similar type of logic puzzle piece to that. So I think in some ways, to me, that's what my first thought was. And the more I played it, the more I thought like, this is like a math textbook of first I have my logic word puzzles that I need, word problems that I need to go back and figure out. And then I've got some simple math that I need to do based on the information. And a lot of it feels like it is a really kind of engaging way to present some of that, you know, fourth grade, fifth grade math. Again, not super hard, but there were plenty of times when I misread a card or lost like I assumed a card was valid and got my math right, but missed something in the logic piece, or had to double check my math a couple different times because it was a card that had not only you had to add up the 3 different things, but then it had 2 different variants, and then also was a shiny. So then it had it, multiplied by 2 for its value. And so I never had to break out pen and paper, but it was like if this was on a phone, this would be a great kind of like brain teaser type of game. Warwana, thanks for making it. Glad you're here.
Yeah, one thing that kind of particularly stood out to me is So given the title, what in the hell?
I can still hear you just fine. Are you getting bad mix?
Yeah, no, it's like my it's like the gain on my mic is automatically reducing, which sometimes StreamYard will do to you, but I thought that I'm really good about explicitly turning that off, automatically adjust mic volume. Yeah, so I don't know what's doing it.
If anybody in the chat's hearing something odd, let us know.
Yeah, thanks.
Lost your train of thought now.
Yes.
Yep.
So this, like, when you look at the title of this, like, it strikes you as like cozy game, right? Is what it telegraphs. But it's somewhat surprising to hear you say, not surprising, but the contrast with that is like you saying that, no, I absolutely have to be like, very highly cognitively engaged.
Yeah, it got to be dialed in to some degree, right? Like this is not a trading card collector simulator. This is granted there are plenty of those type of cozy games, but this is it reads as that. I mean, it is, but as soon as you get into it, and it does a pretty good job of kind of walking you through the tutorial in terms of how it does, and then it ratchets up kind of the complexity as you move through a run.
Okay, very cool. Those are my questions. Yeah, I think I figured it out too. The Elgato Wave software, the gain lock had toggled off for some reason. So I think I hopefully figured it out.
Okay.
All right, man. Yeah, those are all my questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for. I'm always glad to give some time to, especially 4,000 different games last week in the Steam Next Fest. Like, game discovery is more and more challenging, and so I try to be intentional about picking out a few things that catch my eye, that are small teams that may not always get noticed. So, if a Zelda like in Ratcheteer is something people are interested, throw $5 at it, throw a sandwich at it. If trading card inspective logic puzzles, as I just saw Swiss jump online and play The Witness, right? Like if you enjoy type of logic puzzles and puzzle games, trading card inspector is pretty, it's a pretty low bar to entry, but ramps up pretty well in terms of a challenge for puzzles.
Yeah,
all right. Yeah, go ahead.
I get the sense that there is a recurring theme of intentional and deliberate discoverability through all of us. Like in particular, I know I have just hit a point where Steam is not doing it. Like the Game Pass app is not doing it. Metacritic is not doing it. Games Media is not doing it. Like as I've gotten more intense about like getting into my own specific wheelhouse and lanes, that like the need to dive deeper past the veneer of the upper crust that is like the only thing that Games Media informs us of is just becoming more and more necessary.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's in some ways it's not surprising given the volume, but it feels like a breakdown in what was a kind of historic structure. So, and in terms of finding things on Steam, I have, at least for the last couple of years, like if I look at upcoming games, I'm not just going to look at the popular ones. I'm going to click on, and peel back that other layer to get everything that's there. It takes a little bit to dig through, but I've discovered some really enjoyable things that I've talked about on this podcast by not just looking at the biggest names that pop up. Well, let's go from some not big names to the biggest of names, which is GTA. This was a big news week for GTA. They announced the price and pre-order started. And Game Logic, you've got the first news story here, not about the price, because there's plenty of other talk about that. And actually, $80, it doesn't feel like that much of a surprise. But as the pre-orders have started, now we're getting some other news reports or some speculation around that. So why don't you take us through that first one at Push Square? And yes, Warwana, GTA stands for Grand Theft Auto. It was a very popular top-down racing game on the PlayStation 1. So it's, you might want to look it up. Yep.
So the news story that we've got is over on Push Square by Sammy Barker. Microsoft responds to reports of GTA 6 PS5 pre-orders trouncing Xbox. IGN updated its report on GTA 6 pre-orders this week using its own affiliate data to reveal that the PS5 release of Rockstar's upcoming open world is outperforming the Xbox version by 8-1. It originally reported a ratio of 6-1. Oh wow! So that was their update, was to move it from 8-1 to 6-1.
8-1 to 6 to, yeah.
So
from 6-1 to 8-1. Yeah.
The reason I pulled this story was just so we can start right at the top of the news segment with talking about the week of stupid. Like the whole issue with this story of, look, I have really, 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 really tried to exercise grace in not being a person who drags IGN through the mud. Like, and I have, like, there are sites that I affix the label of tabloid, Inquirer, like, UFOs are real, at the checkout aisle of the grocery store type of websites, right? So that's my personal feeling, is that's what Insider Gaming is. I have other sites that I put under that label. IGN has not previously been one of them, but I think in fact, I am now officially putting them in that bucket, which is a shame because they are considered to be an authoritative source on gaming, but like this story is sourced from their Facebook page and people who are part of their deals group. So it has zero anchoring in any stretch of retail, real trade information or data. It's basically a poll for their own readership. It wasn't a poll. I mean, but it's actually like people who have clicked through their affiliate links, right, to get to the pre-order stuff, and people who are answering or responding or whatever. Maybe it is a poll over on their Facebook page. I'm like, I've had a nit about Alinea Analytics, and they are my current like demon in the bottle. Like, and I really thought that there was no possible way to dive down to a depth lower than Alinea Analytics, but here we are. They're like one of the tentpole media outlets, right, in games media, at least as far as the breadth of what they cover, but just diving down to an absolute trash, garbage, rat hole infested like level of journalism. It is flabbergasting. Going on to the second paragraph, obviously this needs to be approached with a degree of skepticism as it doesn't necessarily reflect real world. It does not reflect real world whatsoever. It is a remarkably anecdotal sample population of what's going on. Now,
this is a headline for the click's sake.
Right. I mean, a headline for the click's sake, but then also then all of the ensuing drama right out of social media that follows it. Obviously, this needs to be clicks don't always equal conversions and skews towards the less popular physical release, which doesn't even include a disc. So, like, this is, I struggle to think of. I mean, we've seen and talked about on the show a number of headlines over the years of absolutely worthless, valueless, like articles on blogs, and I'm going to start calling IGN that now a blog. They're not a news website; they're a blog. But this takes the cake.
Yeah, I just it feels like, I mean, one, it is reporting like your own sales data, which isn't. There's no market, as you said. There's no market foundation in that, and it's also hopping on the search algorithm for the week, right, was all about GTA sales and pre-orders, and so getting that information up in your title, like, one, it shouldn't surprise anybody that the PlayStation should outsell the Xbox, especially given, if and for people that watch the industry closely, given the instability that Xbox has been messaging, it shouldn't surprise people. It should even be even less of a surprise. But at the same time, the surprise is like, this isn't based on anything besides who clicked through your affiliates. So,
and this is all part of the, and look, I used to be in tech journalism, and you know, I researched and kept very up to speed on like what all of the other tech blog post sites were doing. I was very well versed in like the constant competition that went on between Engadget and gosh, now I'm forgetting the site because they've significantly fallen from grace. But whoever was like the main Gizmodo,
Okay.
yes,
Gizmodo, that's it. Gizmondo was different. Yes,
literally bloggers running down the halls of CES, physically racing each other to try and get a mic in front of somebody's face first to scoop a story. Right. So that was the legacy of Josh Topolsky and now Nilay Patel. Right now, Nilay is over, obviously Nilay Patel, Paul Miller, those guys who are now over at The Verge. So I was kind of familiar, but like this is the new modality of that, right? This is the new modality of first post. How do you get to be first to post and scoop a story? You source it and base it on nothing, right? On like the slightest shred of a whiff of anything. Like, and the other thing is like they weren't very clear when they posted this. They weren't very clear about how it was sourced, right? It was very kind of like you really had to understand. And I tried to explain this to people a couple of years ago, and I've tried to convey like people needing to understand how SEO has changed, right? A couple of years ago, like Google, I think it was a court case, but yeah, Google was taken to a court case. They settled out of court, and one of the changes that they agreed to do was how they I think it was a court case, was how they manage SEO, and so it started to drift away from this kind of like word search that's in your title. In order to really be picked up by SEO now, the actual content, like there has to be content underneath like the head. Like it can't just be like a headline, right?
Yes, right. And this is why every single recipe has like 5 paragraphs of a stupid story before you get to a recipe, because it needs to get searched.
Yep. And this is why, if you notice on all the tech and gaming sites, like they now have deals editors, right? This is the whole like if you haven't noticed in the last couple of years that like these websites have dedicated staffs, and you like editors that you knew who used to write features and game reviews have been converted over. You hear some of them on podcasts. Now they're the deals editor, and they have a staff of writers, and literally all they do is write deals, because now the deals have to have content underneath them. They can't just post a headline like Amazon's having a great sale. They actually have to have the content of like, so that's why when you go into these articles, they're like lengthy articles. They have like the descriptions of the products in there, because that's what the SEO is searching for. And this, like, and this is part of the results of that. Like, there is a guy at IGN whose specific job is running the deals club and yada yada yada. Like this is why when Prime Week goes, now there's like a week's worth of coverage with these guys writing dozens of articles every single day about what's going on in Amazon, or during Prime Week. Yep. So at any rate, this is the fallout of it. This is like, and the end result is consumers get, because many of these articles I've caught and will come by people's headlines and get into the gaming community and cause this big kerfuffle. And I'm like, guys, you need to understand this is not an actual feature, right? This is a deals article, right? Like the whole thing. A lot of those articles about the whole thing, like you can build a PC for $700 that equals the PlayStation 5 Pro. You go and you read which again, I really appreciate you guys who are in the chat, because I really want you to understand the madness behind the way we do things. The reason I am so insistent about citing the article, the site it's on, and the person who wrote it is so you guys can track these things, because you go to these articles and you look at, and I know who these guys are, and I'm like, oh, that's the deals editor. And then you go down and you look in the article, and you notice that when they write those articles, like this is the PC that matches the PlayStation 5 Pro, they all have links. And then you dig further, they're all affiliate links. So the reason that article got written was so that they could write an article about 36 DIY PC components that were on sale on Amazon or whoever they're an affiliate with links for people to click through, so that when people click on them, that drives metrics and KPIs that are needed for their site. And at best, hopefully, maybe even winds up with somebody making a sale, right, buying something through that. So at any rate, that's where we are.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunately where we are in terms of a games media industry, right? Like for all the flack and crap that the late 2000s and early 2010s had before we got to Gamergate, that at least there, I miss those days because you knew kind of how the search engine worked. You knew what you were, Google AdSense still was creating profit, or at least was churning out some type of money. And there was actual, journalism on broad sites. And it's still out there in pockets, but it is really hard to find, and it does not pop up in a search very often.
The one thing I wanted to add to this is so in addition to the article, now I'm losing my train of thought again. In addition to the article is a lot of the stupid that came right in the Jets trail of the article, which was the pushback from Microsoft was people should wait for real data. And I'm glad, I think it was Soldier who mentioned, Microsoft does not give stats on sales. Right, exactly. So the stupid of this, and and I'll say everyone else chasing it was stupid. I mean, no, I can say it. Yes. So the stupid of this was pointed out by Christopher Dring, who, Andy Robinson, who wrote some of the articles that we're going to talk about here tonight, put out a tweet that said, hey, Microsoft says everybody should wait for real data. And Chris Dring quoted him and said, are we really going to act like real data is going to be reported? Like nobody's going to
come from Microsoft. Yeah.
Nobody's going to report real data of what the GTA sales split was. Matt Piscatella doesn't report that. Like the only way you're going to know, and maybe we'll talk about it tonight because I think there's an article in there about NPD charts. Like the only way you're going to know is if a game came out and some publisher or dev said, hey, we sold X million copies. And then you see the chart come out that's on the Xbox chart that says GTA 6. And if GTA 6 is below somebody else who reported how many copies they sold, then GTA 6 didn't sell as many copies as that other one. It has to be a below, because if you go with, well, it sold at least 6, but that doesn't necessarily tell you anything, right? It sold at least 6 million copies doesn't tell you what the ceiling is of the amount that they sold. So yeah, it's a lot of games.
Well, let's move on to our next news story here. I don't even have a great transition other than the writing was on the wall for this one, and it was not a surprise to see it happen. Sony had Bungie layoffs. So we had Sony's earning call, probably beginning of April, where they talked about overvaluation of Bungie. Then you had Jason Schreier's reporting that once the final update is out for Bungie, which came June 9th, I believe, June 6th, June 9th, that they were looking at significant layoffs. And this week we now have that news story. So this is Andy Robinson over at Video Games Chronicle, that there is a series of announcements here, right? Because you have individual people. You have a letter from Sony, and you have Microsoft, and you have Bungie's announcement as well. So it ends up being like there are multiple different pieces here. And this news article just kind of hits on the quick one. It doesn't get into kind of the fluffy piece from Sony. But it is basically this is not PR. This is what they are pulling from here from Video Games Chronicle, and is pulling from multiple. GameFile is the one who spotted it, that Sony had to issue a WARN notice, WARN, to Washington State, and basically similar to giving kind of a notification of layoffs. And that notification listed 292 people. And in the kind of PR around that, you get the messaging of quote unquote most of the Destiny team, some of Marathon that have been laid off. And I think this is significant for Bungie as a studio in terms of of how much of a team is left to build Marathon into something that they hope it can be. Whether that happens or not, it's a whole different question, but it'll be, it really feels like this is Sony kind of, posting the bounty for the Bungie's head. And I don't see much of a path forward without Marathon really popping. They've had some layoffs before where they have moved people out from Bungie out to other studios within Sony. One of the things that really gets me on the language used by Sony in this is that Destiny did not, or that Destiny failed. That Destiny did not, was not a success. And I think for Sony, Destiny was not a success. And Warwana just talks about this as well, right? Like, disappointed Bungie was purchased. And part of this is that they were purchased for such an overvaluation that Sony had unreasonable, lofty expectations for what that would be. And that, there's news reporting around there in terms of they had multiple game projects spinning up to kind of bolster the valuation. And it is, I would be hard pressed to call Destiny not a success based on what they said, based on Bungie, what they said back in 2013, right? That this was a 10-year game and they were able to tell that 10-year game. This was not a success if you were looking to make steady numbers year after year with a pipeline. Bungie struggled with its pipeline all throughout its development of Destiny 1 and 2. And so yeah, I think the kind of hindsight kind of, rewriting history of Destiny being a failure to me feels short-sighted based on the expectation that everything needs to be Fortnite and live forever. But regardless, 292 people is a pretty significant blow to a studio that was anticipated probably around 600 is what one of the numbers I saw. So thoughts your game logic?
Yeah, a lot, and I'm glad Warwana kind of came in with a secondary comment. So my comment on his earlier comment maybe doesn't have to be as harsh.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great comment for audio listeners. Warwana says, in my opinion, Destiny is a success. The failure, quote unquote, was with management managing funding and overall direction and decisions. Yeah, I think like as an IP, as a game property, as a released title, I would completely agree with that. I think it is a failure in management from multiple generations of management in Bungie. Warwana's follow-up comment, I'd like if they really pumped into as much as they made, I'm sure that it's like if they really pumped as much into it as they made, then sure. It's not a profitable franchise. Yeah. It was at one point, and it's not a forever franchise. And, I think to me, that's a challenge with the game industry and company expectations, that we should expect something to be a forever game every single time. But yes, I think this is a management failure from Bungie and what it means for a studio that has been around 30 years and very formative in the console space.
Yeah, I give it a little more praise than that. So this may rub some people the wrong way, but I'm going to go ahead and say it and take the most conservative view, and then we can have an argument and walk it back. Like there's a lot of what I say is the same thing that happens with Ubisoft, is that there's a ton of nickel backing that is going on about Bungie right now. Like a lot of people want to label Destiny 2 as a failure, and I'm like, I absolutely assure you that like there's 80% plus of gaming industry developers who are like, if Destiny 2 is a failure, that's the kind of failure that I want to have, right? This thing earned billions of dollars over the course of its lifetime. So for us to stand here and call it a failure, I think is, as you mentioned, DBQ, I think is a little short-sighted, right? And then the problem with that type of success, as I talk about with their management, is the success just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and becomes more than you're really capable of handling. And so, like, there's a lot of this terminology that says, Bungie bad, like, Bungie wasn't like let's not put all of the 100% of the blame on this generic term called Bungie, because if you go back through the history of Bungie, the way people are talking about Bungie does not describe the Bungie that's right that reflects the entirety of its history. It reflects the attitude and behavior of an incredibly small percentage of their workforce that was at the top tier of management, right? So it's like literally like 3% of the entire workforce. And I don't even necessarily think, right, when we talk about like decisions that Bungie made, there's a convergence where design decisions converge with business, and there's a point where design options, right, get dictated by business, right? You bring 2 options, you bring 3 options, and then the business tells you which one you're going to have. So I don't know that from a design perspective and from a technical perspective, I can't think in anything that I've read or seen or been exposed to, I can't find a ton of problem with Bungie from a technical perspective, from an implementation perspective, from an execution perspective, right? The game was performant the entire time. I was like, quite frankly, we were just having this conversation on Nate's podcast last night, and I talked about Forza Horizon, and I talked about how there's just a horrible, like this horrible like corner of performance on Forza Horizon that you can get into, and I was singing the praises of Forza Horizon 6, but then we played multiplayer last night, and all those things crept right back up again, right? You're running out of GPU RAM. I'm like, what? I have a 16 gigabyte GPU. Like, what are you talking about? And then fortunately, it didn't do what Forza Horizon 5 used to do, which is once you got into that state, no matter what you did, it would not stop squawking that error message at you. It told you, then it was constantly telling me I had low network bandwidth, and I'm like, what are you talking about? So, like, the entirety of the time that we played Destiny 2, I don't recall any period of time, and maybe it's revisionist history, I don't recall any period of time that I was like, the frame rate's tanking. Like, there's all these technical problems. Like, what's going on? Like, this game was great yesterday. Now it's running at 35 frames per second. So that veneer of the organization, I can't find any fault with. If we have problems with their business management, absolutely. And I won't go into it tonight, but I talk about this whole thing of like how executives are groomed and how executives are grown. And then like, typically if you're interviewing to be hired to take over management of a program that's 3,000 people, then they want to know that you've actually led and are proven that you're capable of leading 3,000 people. So this is a management team that suddenly was overseeing a multi-billion-dollar franchise with 800 employees that did not have the background or experience or career growth, right, to be groomed to handle that. So that's Bungie. Then Sony, the falling down of Sony was the notion that whatever discussion was had, whatever due diligence failed, was the notion that they were buying Bungie based on any theory that there was growth. That is the grotesque, right, tripwire there. Destiny 2, I think, quite frankly, from anyone's observation, I think we were of this mind, was not on the rise. Like, at the best, it was a property that had plateaued, and they were like fighting desperately, and they were going to be lucky to maintain what the player base that they had built. It was incredibly difficult, right? They were at a time, we talked about it a lot on this show. They were at a time where they were churning player base, right? It was like, hey, here's the new content, and we in DBQ, you articulated it, many years ago. Bungie is fine if you come back for the new content, play the new content, and then go away, and then come back in a few months. And that's
if you're on the treadmill, it's going to burn you out. Yeah. Yep.
So if if any notion that you were buying them and the player base was going to increase would have just been a ludicrous premise. And then if you were buying them based on the notion that like Marathon was going to blow up, again, I was telling everybody for years, like, that's not what extraction shooters are on the market, right? Like even I find this week, like lots of people are running around talking about Escape from Tarkov being like this. I'm like, do you guys understand what the player base is of Escape from Tarkov? Like, it's, again, these things are seal clubbing ventures. They're not casual friendly. They're only going to encourage like a certain amount of player base. And quite frankly, Marathon is actually doing quite successfully well in comparison to other extraction shooters, right?
Within that framework and context.
And let's not look at Arc Raiders as the template, because Arc Raiders is not the template. They are an exceptional breakout success. And they have also quickly gotten to a point where they're starting to topple over. So yeah, many mistakes made all around, but I don't necessarily agree with a lot of, this funneling of negative perception or commentary or whatever about Bungie, because I don't think Bungie as a development organization, as a technical organization, is a bad studio. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, just to clarify again, like the failure piece is not in the article from Video Games Chronicle. There were other statements out there and other news headlines around that. So that's kind of where this discussion has taken us, based on the layoffs from Bungie that were reported this week.
Yeah, and then the final piece of where like a lot of the negative flack is coming is because lots of PlayStation fans are salty about PlayStation, right, going after live service. And what I've commented is that there needs to be balance in the force, right? In my mind, they absolutely have to go after live service. Like, it is kind of insane to think about you're going to run a business and the vast majority of your revenue is going to come from other people participating on something you've built. And you're at then constant risk that if those people decide to flake out, right, and go somewhere else or do something, or suddenly, I don't know, maybe like Micron, suddenly come into a position of power, right, and be able to twist your arm behind your back in negotiations, then it might be prudent on your part to actually own something that performs on your platform. Like, that's just risk mitigation. Now, I don't necessarily agree that like there should have been like 12 live service projects spooled up or whatever the number was, because again, we just got done talking about like exercising things that exceed your leadership capacity, right, to do. And like, if you're a baby in this environment, then maybe you should start small. Maybe like we talk in business all the time about crawl, walk, run. Like, why they decided to take off as a sprint with a full field of race cars on the track, like, probably didn't make sense. So I think they've learned, one of the things that they've said is look, basically, anytime we're going to do a live service, we are going to do early access, right? We are going to put it in the hands of players. We are going to get a lengthy period of player feedback, and we are going to get buy-in right before we go live with the thing. So that's a thing that I think. And then I think just scope, going after fewer, a small enough number that they can manage and handle. But I think it's something that they absolutely have to do. I don't think that's a question. And
no, I'm smiling and chuckling because we just had that conversation with Microsoft, right? Like, scope and going after those that they can handle and not just volume. Like, it's the same issue with Microsoft that we were reporting last week in terms of potential studio closures and layoffs. So it is larger game studios chasing after speculative markets that are very difficult to succeed in. So, Hero Down Under and Henry Heck, thanks for joining us. Game Logic, you any other thoughts here? You want to move on to some sales numbers as we're talking business?
Yeah, we can move on.
This is Nintendo.
No, because
So we got, no, I was like, I thought that was kind of a kick over to you, but if you want more of a setup, I can give you more of a setup.
No,
but
I'm just a little discombobulated with my tabs.
I'm going to fill some air here, but we got May Circana numbers. So we've got a couple news stories here around, we got a Switch eShop charts, and then we get some hardware sale numbers as well. So let's start with the eShop at Switch, which we had the release of Star Fox this past week.
So it kind of all starts with Nintendo. This news story over on Nintendo Everything. Nintendo Switch 2 eShop charts June 28, 2026. Star Fox clears the competition. The latest Nintendo Switch 2 eShop charts for the week of June 28th are now available. Star Fox officially landed this week, and following its release, it comes in at number 1. Zelda Breath of the Wild is right behind, with the game receiving a major boost thanks to a sale on the Nintendo eShop. Now, again, we're starting here with just the eShop, what's going on over at Nintendo. So at the top of the chart, Star Fox, Zelda Breath of the Wild Nintendo Switch 2 edition, Pokemon Pocopia, Cyberpunk, Mario Kart World. We'll talk about the narrative that's going on about Mario Kart World here in a bit. Devil May Cry 5, Deltarune, The Adventures of Elliot, which Tao talked about last week, and I know Thrifty is a huge fan of. Donkey Kong Bonanza still selling well. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, which just across the charts, NPD, the eShop charts performing remarkably well. Surprising. Like I didn't think of this game as even having the same splash as Yoshi's Crafted World, but it apparently is doing numbers. Couple other things on the chart that may be notable: Hogwarts Legacy in at 15, EA Sports FC 26 in at 16.
I think those are related to some sales as well.
Yeah, Red Dead Redemption in at 19. So good things going on all around. I quite honestly on Nintendo Everything, I do not understand the difference between all games and download only games. I haven't seen an explainer behind that, so I'm not gonna go through.
The distinction would be is that there's box copies out in the world as well, where
Gotcha.
like Deltarune, Toby Fox's download only game. I mean, but then you get things like Hades 2, which is gonna end up with a physical copy, but not there. So yeah, I think that's a distinction.
I guess this is if you eliminated the physical sales and only looked at the digital downloads, then that would be that. But I think that gets a little.
I think it's a pointless chart because like these are eShop charts. Going back to our IGN story of how we're actually getting our data, this is not like it is Nintendo reporting sales. This is eShop. So even if there's a box copy of Star Fox hitting number 1 on the eShop is still only eShop purchases.
Yeah, but I also think this is a Nintendo thing to give credit to the site, because I believe
yes, it is.
Nintendo has a download only section, which again is a thing like I do not understand why they label it like that, because the only thing you care about while you're on the eShop is the things you're downloading digitally. But
this is not a knock on Nintendo Everything. This is a Nintendo structural piece. Yeah,
but I think for the purposes of our discussion, I think we'll just focus on the chart that includes the physical sales on it, because that's the most pertinent. So anything here jump out and surprise you?
Not too much. I mean, we expect kind of Star Fox makes sense. It's the only first party title that came out this month. Zelda, Mario Kart, Poketopia are all kind of perennial. It's nice to see Deltarune hit the top 10 because the next chapters just came out this past 2 weeks or so. So that makes sense that it got bumped back up after kind of probably being out of the top 10. So I would bet Square Enix would have liked to see Adventures of Elliot be a little higher. It'll be interesting to see what those numbers on other platforms end up looking like. Yourself, any other analysis there? Or do we want to move off to?
We can go into the next one. The next news story right now: Switch 2's first-year hardware sales for the U.S. have been revealed. A promising start. This news story over on Nintendo Life by Liam Doolin. Last month, Nintendo's end-of-year financial data revealed the Switch 2 was just shy of 20 million unit sales globally as the new hybrid device enters its second year. Circana has now revealed the system's first-year sales in the U.S. in its first 12 months in this market. The Switch 2 has apparently sold 6 million units. So, its first 12 months. Yeah, okay. So that rounds out the year?
Yes. Because June was June 6th or so is when the Switch 2 released. So if you're doing 12 months, it's not June to June, it's June to the end of May. And so getting the end of May numbers now in June would give you 12 months. So that's how I'm reading it. It's an interesting
the sentence is
word
still screwed up,
splitting.
right?
Yeah.
Because it sold 20 million units by the time their fiscal year ended. And their fiscal year ended before the Switch 2 had been on the market for a full year, right?
Yes, their fiscal year ends at the end of March.
Okay. So, yeah, I think this sentence is screwed up. So I believe
But I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think the 20 million that we saw was worldwide, because as we'll look again at VGC charts for the next news story in terms of estimates and lifetime sales in America for Switch 2 are around in the Americas, taking on World Cup here with that it is just it's 7.2 million, so which is higher than the US at 5.9, but again, not worldwide sales. And so I think that it is lots of numbers. We definitely need to be kind of double checking where they're sourcing that number from.
Okay, so it's good that we now understand that. It leaves us still a bit out of skew because that 6 million units sold in the US for its first year, which, as we mentioned, crosses 2 fiscal years. So you can't say those 6 million units were out of the 20 million units that were sold. Something more than those 20 million units have been sold, and that less the 6 million units is the total amount that have also been sold globally. So there's not a good way to extrapolate from this number, like where they're headed for sales for the year, unfortunately.
Yep, I think that's a fair statement.
But the main thing is, this is
selling
good.
Well. Yeah.
Now the price increase has not come into effect. That goes into effect in September. So we would expect those sales to slow. Maybe, but we're not absolutely certain because the other 2 consoles will also be, well, at least one of the other sets of consoles will also be more expensive. And there's lots of fear and panic now that PlayStation will also raise prices. So that could have the effect that the Nintendo Switch 2 sells more because it will be the most affordable console on the market at the time.
Yeah, in a market that has, seen increased price increases, like increasing frequency. There we go. I got there eventually, ladies and gentlemen. Right? Like, to say that we've got the announcement of Microsoft's price increases coming later in their news rundown. I think Sony's jumped up at the beginning of this year sometime. I got to go back and look at when that was, but right, that brought the PlayStation Pro up over 900 or around 900. So yeah, what this looks like in terms of sales after the fact, after those price increases come, I think this is going to be really interesting. And we saw a little bit of this with the Steam Deck conversation last week as well, of where does that elasticity in the market stop for hardware? And at what point are people, in a market that is very often eager to jump on the new thing because it's a tech market, when does that price elasticity hit us, and where does that pinch point in terms of where it is no longer, the sales numbers start to drop off after such a certain points? So our next, speaking of sales numbers, our next story here comes from VG Charts. This is done by William DeLangelo. Again, it lines up and segues right from the Nintendo sales that starts off with Nintendo Switch 2 being highest selling with 307 units sold for May of 2026. The estimate, these are estimates of May. And this is where we get the number of Switch 2 is sold 7.2 million lifetime in the Americas. A PlayStation 5. Go ahead. Yeah.
So one thing I want to point out, and I think we are just in this. We are correct. Like, again, going back to the state of affairs of games media, we are in a world now where VG Charts is now a more reliable data source than IGN. And definitely Alinea Analytics.
Right. 10, 15 years ago, VG Charts was like 10 years ago, it was the, redheaded stepchild, black sheep of the family in terms of estimates. Yeah. Yep. One of the other piece here is that they talk about, and this comes up in a couple other news stories as well, is that you get sales from PlayStation 5. PlayStation 5 sales in the Americas was 113,000, or in the United States, it was about 93,000 units. This is the lowest monthly sales that PlayStation has had back to 2019. PS5 sales compared to the same month for PS4 in 2019. So this is the same month, basically, number of years of release time, 6 years out, 5.5 out. They're down by over 8,200 units. This was another news story has the PlayStation 5 hitting lowest numbers since the 2020. Yeah, there's another one here from going back to Andy Robinson over at Video Games Chronicle, where it talks about PlayStation 5 fell to its lowest since May 2000, which I haven't seen the full numbers of that, but basically these numbers are down for PlayStation as well. Not even going to really talk about Xbox, right? Because Xbox lifetime sales, the estimates here from VG Charts are 21.5 million. Again, for the Americas, the PlayStation 5 for the Americas lifetime sales is 36.2 million. But again, that ratio feels relatively tight from Microsoft to PlayStation, but then you have to remember that this is just the Americas and not worldwide. And that's where Microsoft does not have much of a foothold anyplace else. And that's where Sony really makes up ground in terms of going back to our very reliably sourced IGN news article in terms of the ratio of PlayStation to Xbox sales. So again, I think one of the things that the numbers that I'm seeing in these numbers and that it hits at is going back to that price sensitivity in terms of when do we see, and it's not unexpected to see a 6-year-old console start to lose year-over-year sales because you're hitting some type of market. And usually, 10 years ago, you could see those sales increase because the trajectory was that you dropped the price of your hardware 5-6 years out so that people who were more price sensitive were then able to jump on, and who have been waiting for a price drop have been able to jump on. That's not the case in this generation, is that prices continue to go up. And so people that are price sensitive are still going to be priced out of that. As we were talking about last week, like being an early adopter is the cheapest way to buy video game consoles at this point. Let's move on to our final news story, unless you've got some other follow-ups here. But our final news story ties right in with those price sensitivity. And we get, this is one more from Video Games Chronicle. This has been plenty of other places. This is Microsoft announcing that they are increasing the price of consoles in August 1st. So we get that starting August 1st, the 1 terabyte Series X will jump up $150 to a retail price of $750. And the disc for the without a disc and with a disc is going to retail for $799 or $800. The Series S model, which launched, correct me if I'm wrong, but launched at like $299 back when it launched, is
the
now
same price as the Nintendo Switch when it launched.
Yep, is now going to cost $499. and the 1 terabyte is going to be $599. So this goes right back to what you were saying of the Switch 2 may not be the cheapest console right now, but is sure going to be in a little bit of time again. And I think, go ahead.
We now live in a world like it's again, it's crazy. I used to comment about how like there was a $399 Xbox console on the market that arguably was more performant than the original Nintendo Switch at the same price.
Yep.
Would play all of the AAA games that were on the market at the time, because this was at a time before, developers were skipping Xbox, had access to Game Pass, and would play at 1440p. And it was $299. Same price that they were charging for you for the Nintendo Switch. And despite that value prop, it got outsold. It didn't just get out, like it got dog walked by the Nintendo Switch. And so now we're in a world where the base of that model will now be $499, the same price as the Switch 2. But now the Switch 2 is actually the more capable piece of hardware because it uses DLSS and has upscaling, right? And then has the additional value prop of now being handheld, which it had before, but I think now when you dock it, it plays at 4K. So yeah, it's just a crazy turn of events, twist of the knife, really is. I would say.
Yeah, no, right? And there were times when early in the Series S and X generation, like holiday sales were putting it at $230, or bundled with multiple games at $299, and which at that point was a great value proposition. It feels really hard. I can't even imagine that they're making a whole lot of Series S's anymore, right? Like at this price point, what's the justification to jump into this versus a Nintendo Switch 2 at this point for the Series S?
I also think we're seeing like consumer like loss of faith, right? This is the same thing that you would have had in the Sega Saturn time period, in the Sega Dreamcast period, where despite the fact that the corporation is insisting that they're going to stick with it, there's shaky doubt and disbelief on the market, to where if a consumer is going to go in, especially now we're talking about all these rising prices, and now we are talking about, like I used to say, like for me with the Series S, and I think for some other people, $299, that's the type of price where I say, for $299, I can afford to be wrong.
Sure, right? Like for $299, I will hook it up to the TV by my treadmill and play, right?
Right. But at $499, like consumers can't afford to be wrong. So now the down select on placing a bet now becomes more critical. And so you look at what's going on with Xbox, you look at all like the wackadoodle and the craziness and like the amount of like what the heck is going on. And that doesn't encourage a consumer to walk in and plunk down $499. And that's $499 for the, like, now we're at a point where 6 years later, it is the anemic tailpipe exhaust sucking, SKU on the market. Much less contemplating chunking down $599 for the 1 terabyte model, are plowing $750 into the digital Series X, when you're like, I don't know like what's going on with this platform going into the next generation,
Well, and that's what Hero Down Under says in the chat, right? Like signs are clearer than their words, right? Like I can't see what's the proposition, what's the pitch to buy an Xbox at this point, where if you're not already in that that infrastructure, and all signs point to pulling the fire alarm at Microsoft in the Xbox, division, what are you buying into? What makes you say, yeah, this is a great long-term purchase, if you already are not in that infrastructure? And if you're in that infrastructure, you already own one of these models. Like I understand the price increases that we had this conversation last week with the Steam machine. I totally understand the price increases in order to reflect the cost of components. But from a market condition, you're already losing. You are already 3-1, 4-1 behind in PlayStation, and that now increasing your hardware, you're not going to. I don't see how this does anything for Microsoft. Like, yes, on a spreadsheet you could, and maybe this is exactly what it does, right? Like on a financial report, you have shown that you have increased your prices to align with market conditions, and if those don't sell, maybe it is easier to write them off as lost inventory, right, rather than to take a bath on a sale at a loss. There certainly there's some possibilities in there. I don't know, but yeah. Anyhow, Brap, glad you're here. Yeah, lots of conversation. Yes, Brap, you should definitely pick up a Switch 2 because it's just going to get more expensive. Yeah, any type of purchase that we all made prior to the last 2 years has been a better value than trying to buy something retroactively as the prices go up. So
Yeah, and so the consumer, the value prop now is, if at least if you buy a Steam machine at a price point that you may feel is too much, at least you have a PC and you know that Steam isn't going anywhere. Because if Steam goes somewhere, that means the entire PC market is going away, and that's not happening anytime soon. If you buy a PlayStation or a Nintendo, you have assurances of additional longevity. If you buy an Xbox, in the more risky proposition is if you buy an Xbox and they do fold up on it, then it's also going to lose its resale value. So it's not like these other things that you buy that, like, if something happens, you should be able to resell it. So it's a worrisome state of affairs.
yeah, I think Warwana, you make a comment here, which I've been thinking quite a bit about, actually, and not in terms of the specifics, but about Microsoft's commitments in court. Right, Warwana says Microsoft would love to not make consoles, but they told the CMA in court they want the ability to compete in consoles. I think from a corporate standpoint that the crux of the entire court argument around the Activision Blizzard King acquisition was that it would create not necessarily a monopoly, but would reduce competition, create unfair market conditions, and that Microsoft would be in an advantage in a market space. I think from a legal point of view that Microsoft could certainly easily argue that whole line of reasoning is no longer valid because that is not the position that they're in. So any commitments that they made were based on those assumptions. So I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, but I've been in enough corporate boardrooms to understand the loopholes when somebody says something. And to me, that feels like an easy out for Microsoft to. I don't have any. I mean, other than yes, they are putting Call of Duty out on the Switch, but that could be a one and done. If actually, it probably won't be because now they've built an engine and they'll just keep recycling it over like EA did. So maybe not so much that case. Anyhow, man, we had plenty of news today. So, and good conversation in the chat. I really appreciate that. Any other final thoughts on the news of the week, Game Logic?
My only thing about the and I think Warwana and I have, like, this is actually, I think, partially in jest about the wanting to compete in consoles. The thing is with that illusion in court, right? As you said, like, clearly that has not come to fruition. But my other thing is, like, for all of the detractions that I make to Xbox, they do a wonderful job at walking very fine lines, right? So they also led the EU to believe, right, with their statements and with statements that they had other people corroborate for them, that they were not going to keep any Bethesda titles exclusive. So and their out was that they didn't explicitly say that they weren't. They just suggested that it wouldn't make sense for them to. That doesn't mean that they can't reevaluate, right, and then change and make a different decision, which is exactly what they did. So
Yeah. Yep. Warwana. Yes, Microsoft is the king of loopholes. Very nice point there. Anyhow, game logic. Let's move over into our final roundup here. And as much as we've been talking about the challenging state of Microsoft, we have a handful of Microsoft games in this rundown here. But let's start with the first one on your list. This is one that my uncle and I have, picking away at ever since its release, and definitely have come back to. One of the things that I have loved about Borderlands 4 post-release as the way that it scales when you jump in with other players, that my uncle and I can be at totally different levels and both playing enemies at our level rather than previous Borderlands where it depends on who game you entered. So, but you're playing on PC by yourself. What brought you back to Borderlands 4?
Well, I hadn't played it.
So at all? No. Okay.
No, I skipped it last year. So I can't remember exactly when I bought it. I may have bought it recently. I'm not sure. But and Brat mentions questions about the Xbox ecosystem and rumors, but as I've informed Brat, we do not discuss rumors and conjecture on the show. So
I saw that as well.
Yes, bypassing your comment. So
we'll bypass your comment by addressing it directly. Yes.
Yeah, so I hadn't come to it. I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed its scaling. There are elements of this game that I do not appreciate right now. I've been on a bit of a shooter tear, so this has been one of the ones that I have not appreciated. I think the frame pacing is horrible on PC.
Technically on PC, it's
no,
and even at this point, I remember I played it on launch and talked about it here of how rough it was on PC. It is still rough on PC.
Yeah, very much so. And I was playing it on an RTX 3080 Ti. I had to drop it to 1440p, so I was not playing at 4K. I had to make some other tweaks. So I dropped it to 2560 by 1440p. I had to make some other tweaks to get it to perform. Quite frankly, the cell shading graphics don't even look as sharp as previous versions of Borderlands. And like I said, the frame pacing is horrible. And all of this, just I'm in 2025, with I can't remember, is Borderlands 4 built on Unreal Engine? Or is it there? Okay.
No, I think it's been Unreal though. I mean, this is why you've had shader pop in since the very beginning, is that it was built on Unreal.
Yeah. So with all of the grandstanding and stuff from Randy Pitchford last year, I just felt like this game should be performed. I have loved the Borderlands series, and this is the first one that I haven't fallen in love with. Now I will say it seems like it's chugging a little better as I've gotten past the first 3 hours and gotten to the safe house on the top of the cliff or whatever, and I'm now proceeding on the real proper adventure. So maybe those were the opening levels and things will get a little better. I just felt like the combat just was not very smooth and fluid. What I will say is I do appreciate the new alts and the skill tree. I'm playing Amon, who is the Forge Knight. So his attacks are very visceral. They have a lot of punch to them. They have a lot of weight. I often, criticize games where, you're supposed to be this big burly character, but you feel like this wispy waif. Your punches are very ethereal. But that's not the case here. So I'm glad to see that. At least with this class of character, and then I hope there's some differentiation amongst the other characters. But I'm having a okay time with it. I am not having a time with it that equates to its 80 something whatever rating that it has on Metacritic. But we'll continue plugging through it and see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how. I enjoyed Borderlands 3 because I played it with people. I don't necessarily know that I enjoyed Borderlands 3 story. I like the world that 4 does. It also feels like it made it big and open for the sake of being big and open, and there's a lot of dead space in there as well. like in combat encounters, and when you get into things, it still captures some of that Borderlands kind of, moving around, getting, going from one skill to the next, and kind of keeping moving and having kind of that frenetic combat. But yeah, I do wish it ran better, and that's for sure. Yes, Hero Down Under. Yes, a lot of Dead Space. Yes, there's a lot of failed crossover multimedia properties that Borderlands is. That was a joke for those of you listening. Back to EA's cross-media success story of Dead Space. 2 words.
The other game I've been playing, one of the other games I've been playing is Forza Horizon 6. Finally loaded that up and started playing it on PC. One of the weekend projects that I've been doing is completing my conversion in the game room of monitors that I wanted to move over to OLED. So that was one of the stations that I picked up an OLED, and so I needed to test it out. Loaded up Forza Horizon 6. Single player experience, great, absolutely amazing on PC. In terms of technical performance, so all my criticisms of Forza Horizon 6 remain. I can't remember if I mentioned it in our Discord, but what I mentioned in another Discord and on social media was on Blue Sky was, I'm not ready to write Playground an apology letter, but I will say the chasm, the difference in performance for Forza Horizon 6 on PC compared to Xbox is a chasm. I mean, it's huge, and I mean that in a complimentary way. Whereas the difference between Forza Horizon 5 on PC versus Xbox Series X was not nearly as big, in my opinion. And it was plagued by technical problems, like I said, over its life cycle with, NVIDIA implementations. And like I said, it popping that error that, oh my God, you're running out of VRAM, and just totally ludicrous error messages, and often would perform well one night and then the next day would struggle to hit 60 frames per second on a PC with a big burly graphics card. And I'm like, what is going on here? A lot of that seems to have been smoothed out on Forza Horizon 6 on single player. However, the moment I jumped into multiplayer, it just tanked. I was initially at 4K. It didn't even run right at 4K in multiplayer. It was stuttering frames. It was dropping 10, 15 frames at a time. I cycled it down to medium settings, and then it played fine for a while. Actually, quite honestly, the way it looked at medium settings for a few races was actually punching above its belt, and that was on an RTX 4070 Super. But then a little later in the night, I started getting, again, messages that I'm running out of VRAM. Those would clear, but they were just kind of nuisance alarms. But then the thing of you're losing CPU bandwidth and network bandwidth, which were just totally ludicrous. So those did not seem to have any impact. They were just nuisance messages and alerts. So and the VRAM thing did not, typically when that VRAM thing would pop, particularly on Forza Horizon 5, it was a great, you would start graceful degradation to the point where you finally got a cascade to the game just pulling itself down and crashing. So fortunately I was not exposed to that last night, we played multiplayer for 3 hours. So at least right now, I don't think that will cause a state of toppling the application over. But but regardless, it's still not appreciated for, again, what is supposed to be the flagship title for the platform now.
Yeah, it really is the flagship. So yeah, it's interesting to hear the performance on PC and kind of the challenges there. So anything else? Where are you at? I know you were playing multiplayer on PC, but where are you? Did it pull over your existing profile and all of your unlocks and everything else? So it's all integrated in, right?
Yes. Yeah. I was playing via the Xbox app, so it was my Xbox account. So there was there wasn't any gap or anything. So yeah, it was my same persona. I'm at I'm probably at about 30 hours. I think I'm at level 90 something in the game. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm at about 42, still logging in and doing some, the weekly seasons, but I kind of feel like I'm done with it. I'm not playing online. So I think Warwana, yes, this comment up here in terms of, your boss's biggest issue with it, that it didn't capture the Japanese car culture well. Yeah, I think this was one of Game Logic's first kind of knocks on it, is it feels like it doesn't do a whole lot with the setting. And my knock on it is it feels very sterile, and it doesn't capture it. Everything feels very washed over and cleaned up in a video game kind of like idealized version. So
yeah, the comparator I struck on last night, and you'll appreciate this, is that compare Forza Horizon, which is supposed to be an entire game, a $70 game entirely about racing in Japan. Compare that to the first 8 hours or so of the Crew Motorfest. You get more exposure to Japanese racing culture in 8 hours.
Events, yeah,
in 8 hours of the Crew Motorfest, which is the opening stage level and biodome. Than you do right in the entirety of Forza Horizon 6 that I've seen.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is a piece that I hadn't it's a piece that I haven't seen people talk about very much. I thought of it like as it first came out, like, oh yeah, there's Tokyo Drift, there's drift racing in the Crew Motorfest, and it feels like, and maybe it's just like it takes on a more nighttime neon, street racing look that is lit in a way that doesn't have to be lit. The world doesn't have to have consistent lighting because it's only small little areas in the Crew, versus in Horizon, like, yeah, you may be driving downtown in Horizon 6 Tokyo, but it is lit just the way everything else in that world is. And I think that takes away from some of the atmosphere that could be there as well.
There are some geographical touches, just to give it like one or two, not like there's a northern region, I can't remember what the region is, but there's a northern region where, like, when you go up there at first, like it's a lot of like snow covered mountains and stuff. So that's neat. And there's one race that we did last night where the starting point is on some highway, and when you hit this when you're on this highway, there's a big overlook over the city of Tokyo, and it's a beautiful shot, like of the landscape, peeking through the mountains. And I thought, okay, now that geographical inference kind of makes me feel like situated in that world. But again, you got to do more than geography, right? I expect you to do geography, right? Because that's an inherent component of the game. So
yeah. No, and I, 42 hours, I have enjoyed what I've played, but I don't know that I'm wringing a whole lot more out of it at this point, which is why I went back to Forza Horizon 5 and realized how much I hadn't done in it. Like, just this week, I went back and did all like the big kind of Colossus Eliminator Marathon, all those big kind of capstone races. 25 minutes in Marathon, or Colossus of driving through all the different areas in Mexico. So, and I think, yeah, I mean, again, it reminds me of how much I haven't wrung out of previous Forza games. And so I don't want to be too hard on Forza Horizon, because I surely got my Game Pass money out of it, but it also feels like it's a missed opportunity in terms of what it could be as well. So, talking about missed opportunities, you're going back to another game here on the Switch 2. So, Grid Legends Deluxe Edition on the Switch 2. Just this week or 2 weeks ago, we had the announcement that Grid Legends, the servers for Xbox and PlayStation are shutting down, but not for Switch 2. So you had picked this up before. I remember you talking about it. What got you back into it? Was it just the cycle, or once you were racing on one, you wanted to go back and kind of draw some comparisons?
Yeah, and that was mostly it. So Grid Legends Deluxe Edition 2026 release came out in January for the Switch 2. And that was it. Since I am not playing Call of Duty as like my main grind game, I still have the leisure workflow paradigm of, as I will tonight, like, we'll get off the podcast, I won't feel like getting into anything deep, because I want I'm going to want to play for like an hour, maybe 2 at most, right before I go to bed. And so I need like some genre that fits that bill of like a thing that I can get into. But if I decide to drop it in 30 seconds, I can get out, and I have known entertainment that I'm going to get out of it. And that's, racing games for right now. So that's kind of where, and yes, once I was engaged playing Forza Horizon 6 again, I was like, let me, hook up some racing games at other places. And so it was Grid Legends, which I've had since launch. But I'd put it aside to go do other stuff. And so I went back to it today or this week. Yeah, just crazy, like the all the drapings that are around this game. I actually hit IMDb and looked at like some of the actors and actresses that they pulled into this, and they at least the girl who plays Linda Carvalho is an actress that's like in other like major properties and stuff. So it's crazy, like the effort they went into Codemasters. And this was not like a mainline Codemasters game, right? This was like a side gig. It was kind of crazy, all the production that they put around this game to have like this little like soap opera going on, in and amongst the racing thing and all these personas and characters and stuff like that. So it's actually been kind of fun because while I'm very happy with like the competence of the racing, despite the fact that the Pro Controller does not have analog triggers, it drives remarkably well despite that. It's also kind of funny to be watching the campy and cheesy cutscenes as well. The other thing that I've been playing this week is Halo Infinite. Again, another thing that I pulled up to test one of the OLEDs at a different workstation. The one that I'm podcasting from tonight. So again, playing that on OLED, and one of the things that's come out while I've done this conversion is the first OLED I had was at a game station where I also had the Switch 2 hooked up, and I was like, the Switch 2 looks great on an OLED, but like, when I'm PC gaming on it, because it's at a station where I have a Switch 2 and a PC, I'm like, I don't really need more OLEDs, for PCs. And then like every time I would play a PC game on the OLED, I'd be like, are you sure about that? I don't know, man. So, so I, finally that FOMO hit me this weekend. And Halo Infinite, looks, the main graphics on it look great. There are elements of the graphic design that have not aged well with time. Like you get into like the facial animations and the facial things with some of the Marines, and they do not look good, here, 3-4 years later. But it is an interesting campaign to romp through. I think we talked about last time, like Master Chief's ability to just traverse the entire mountainous region of the Zeta Halo ring. Like, it's just kind of crazy. It will be interesting for people to be playing who will play Campaign Evolved next month. I'm like, I don't know how you go back to like old Halo, like movement mechanics, right, when you've been on this one.
Very blocky, chunky in its movement. Yeah.
I popped an achievement for reaching the highest peak on the Zeta ring. There's a point where you take over a fob, and Weapon advises you to, hey, if you want to get a survey of the entire ring, you should go to this point. And you go to that point and you pop an achievement, which was funny because I got there, there's a fight there, and then I was going on to my next objective. I was like, oh, well, I don't really need to go to the top. But I was like, but maybe there's something, maybe you go to the top and like they do a cutscene of you like surveying the whole Zeta ring or whatever. So I said, let me go ahead and do that. And then I went up and popped an achievement. It's apparently a super rare one because only like 5.4% of Xbox gamers have that achievement. So, but it looked really well. This is the one OLED that I picked up that is an ultra widescreen. So, it's, just really, really great for playing shooters on. So yeah. And that game was very performant. This is actually, it's ridiculous. It's a 240 hertz OLED ultra widescreen, which even as I purchased it and hooked it up, after I had it all powered up, I was like, I actually went and Googled. I'm like, why in the world do you need is there a 240 hertz like OLED? Like, no, who needs that? And it gave me back, the esports players and blah 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 blah. And I was like, okay, man, whatever.
Future proofing.
Yeah. Because
the price is only going to go up, as we've already established.
If you're listening to all the fear mongering about prices in the DIY market, then focus on the stuff that hasn't gone up in price. I mean, monitors is one of those.
Yep. All right. Well, that wraps up everything from the show today. Usually at this time, we're talking about new releases. Not a whole lot coming out this week. It is 4th of July week in America. We hit the beginning of end of June, beginning of July. We've got some games coming out. Into July's got lots of games coming into it. We got Black Flag Resynced from Assassin's Creed. We get new college football, EA Sports 27. Splatoon Raiders comes out later in the month, as we just talked about with Halo Combat Evolved, Campaign Evolved, excuse me. So lots to talk about once we hit into July, but not anything big on the radar for this week. Any other final thoughts here, Game Logic? I just want to say thanks to everybody who came through the chat. We had, let's see here, we got RPG88, Real Nate, Soldier for Life, Warwana, Hero Down Under, Brap, I think that, and Henry Heck. Glad to have everybody here. And if I missed you, I apologize. But I always appreciate the conversation that happens both with us in the middle of the show as you all are talking with us, but as you're talking with yourselves as well. So I appreciate the community and the sense of community that you bring each and every week here on Enough to Keep Going. Game Logic, any other final thoughts as we wrap the show up?
Nope.
All right. Well, this has been episode 300 and 300. How about 439? There we go. 439 for Sunday, June 28th. I have been your host, DPQ Hams, and joining me tonight was Game Logic. We'll be back again next week, as we always are on Sunday, 8 o'clock Eastern, talking about what we've been playing, what the news of the industry has been, and some analysis around it. And as always, talking with you throughout the time as well. So if you will be here, we'll be glad to have you. If you're listening to this after the fact, this is when we record Sunday evenings. Come on back, join us in chat. Thanks again, everybody. And until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.